Have you ever sat across from your sibling at a family dinner, smiling, chatting, reminiscing, and yet, somewhere deep down, you felt off? Maybe it was something in their tone. Maybe it was the way they brushed off your story, or how they seemed just a little too interested in your failures but oddly quiet during your victories. And you wondered just for a moment, do they really like me? Or have they been holding something against me all these years? If you've had thoughts like that, you're not alone. Many older adults carry a lifetime of complicated family dynamics, especially with siblings. You've shared a childhood, a family, maybe even a room. But time passes, people grow, and not all wounds heal. In fact, some resentments get buried so deep they come out sideways, through sarcasm, silence, or even smiles that feel more like masks. Today we're going to talk about something most people avoid, the subtle, often painful signs that your sibling might secretly hate you. Now, hate is a strong word, and maybe it's not always about hate in the truest sense. But when feelings like jealousy, resentment, or rivalry are left to stew for decades, they can grow into something that feels just as heavy. We're not here to stir up trouble or make you feel bad. We're here to help you see more clearly, protect your peace of mind, and recognize patterns that might be draining your emotional energy. Because at this stage of life, you deserve peace, not passive-aggressive drama. So let's gently dig into it, starting with the first sign that something might be wrong behind the scenes. Have you ever noticed your sibling making jokes at your expense? Jokes that seem harmless on the surface, but leave you feeling a little humiliated or hurt? Maybe they poke fun at your weight, your memory, or even how your kids turned out. And when you speak up, they laugh and say, "Oh, come on, you're too sensitive." Or "Can't you take a joke?" This kind of behavior is often brushed off as sibling banter. But if it keeps happening, especially around others, it may not be just teasing. It could be contempt wrapped in humor. That kind of sarcasm is a way to express hostility without taking responsibility for it. They get to hurt you and still look like the fun one. And it leaves you feeling confused, unsure whether you're being too touchy or whether you're just now starting to see their true colors. Now imagine a pattern where your sibling always forgets to tell you important things. Maybe they didn't mention that a relative passed away until days later. Maybe they left you out of a gathering or didn't tell you the full story about a situation that involved you. They might call it forgetfulness or say they assumed you knew. But when this happens more than once, and always at moments that seem important, it starts to feel like more than coincidence. This kind of passive sabotage is subtle. It's not loud or dramatic, but it creates distance. It chips away at trust. It quietly tells you, you're not part of this. You don't matter enough to be in the loop. And if you confront them, they may look surprised, even hurt, flipping the situation so you feel like the one who overreacted. Sometimes the pain doesn't come from what they do. It comes from what they can't seem to do. Like be happy for you. You share good news. Maybe your granddaughter just graduated, or you finished that garden you've been working on for months, and instead of sharing your joy, they quickly change the subject. Or worse, they downplay it. "Oh, college isn't what it used to be," they might say. Or, "That garden must have taken you forever. I wouldn't have the patience for that." That lack of joy, of shared celebration, isn't always obvious at first. But when it becomes a pattern, it tells you something important. This person is keeping score. Your wins make them uncomfortable. Maybe it reminds them of their own regrets, or maybe they just don't like seeing you shine. Either way, it creates a chill in the relationship, a sense that your happiness makes them smaller instead of inspired. At this point in life, most of us are looking back just as much as we're looking forward. We think about the paths we took, the choices we made, the bonds we built, and it can be heartbreaking to realize that someone who shared so many chapters of your story might still be holding on to a rivalry that started decades ago, but it's also freeing to name what's really going on. To say, this feels like competition, not love. And that's another big red flag, when every conversation feels like a race. You mention a trip you took to the coast, and they counter with a story about how they went farther, spent more, or had a better time. You talk about volunteering at your church, and they shift to how they were asked to lead something even bigger. It's not just casual conversation, it's one-upmanship. When someone constantly tries to outdo you, it's rarely about the actual events. It's about validation. It's about insecurity. It's about needing to prove that they're still ahead, even if it's only in their own mind. And over time, that dynamic is exhausting. You start editing yourself, sharing less, because what's the point if every joy is turned into a competition? What's hardest, perhaps, is when this all happens behind a mask of politeness or family love. You don't want to think badly of them. You might still remember the kid they were or the good moments you've shared. But love without respect isn't real love. And siblings who secretly harbor resentment often act like they care until you really need them. You ask for help moving something heavy, and they're suddenly too busy. You need support during a health scare, and their texts go silent. But when the spotlight's on, like at a family reunion or holiday dinner, they're all smiles and hugs. That gap between how they act in public and how they behave when no one's watching is the space where hidden hate lives. And let's be clear, this isn't about demonizing your sibling. Maybe they had a harder childhood than you realized. Maybe they were always compared to you and felt second best. Maybe life didn't turn out the way they hoped, and seeing you thrive feels like salt in the wound. But understanding the reason doesn't mean you have to tolerate the behavior. You deserve relationships that feel safe, supportive, and real. Not ones that leave you questioning your worth or walking on eggshells. Not at this stage. Not ever. And maybe, just maybe, part of you has known this for a long time. Maybe it's time to trust that quiet voice inside, the one that says, something's not right. Because that voice? It's your wisdom. It's your protector. And it never speaks without reason. Sometimes the signs aren't loud or obvious. They don't come wrapped in arguments or slammed doors. Instead, they slip through the cracks. Quiet comments, missed calls, a certain coldness that only you seem to notice. And one of the most subtle but powerful signs that something deeper is going on is when support starts to feel hollow. You might recognize it during important milestones, those times when you need someone to lean on, to cheer for you, to simply show up. Maybe you just had surgery and expected a visit or a phone call. Maybe you retired after decades of hard work, and the only response you got was a passing congrats buried in a group text. It's not that they forgot. It's that they chose not to show up emotionally, and that choice speaks volumes. Superficial support is easy to spot once you stop making excuses for it. It looks like concern, but it feels like absence. It sounds like they're cheering you on, but deep down you can tell they're just checking a box. And it's especially noticeable when you compare it to how they show up for others, or even how you show up for them. What's tricky about this kind of behavior is that it often flies under the radar. To others, your sibling might seem warm, polite, even kind. But when you really need them, emotionally, practically, or just as a friend, they're suddenly too busy, too tired, too unavailable. And you're left wondering if it's something you did, or if the truth is simply that their love has strings attached. That brings us to something even more subtle, and sometimes more damaging. Control disguised as care. You've probably heard it before, phrases like, "I'm just looking out for you," or "I only say this because I love you." But instead of those words making you feel safe, they leave you second-guessing your choices, your worth, even your independence. You might mention wanting to move to a new neighborhood or take a class at the community center, and suddenly your sibling is listing all the reasons you shouldn't. That's too far. What if you fall? You're not as sharp as you used to be. On the surface, it sounds like concern, but underneath it feels like fear. Not your fear, but theirs. A fear of losing control. A fear of you becoming something they can't monitor or manipulate. And let's face it, after 60, many of us are reclaiming time, space, and energy we once poured into raising families or building careers. This is a season where your choices should feel expansive, not confined. So when a sibling starts acting like a gatekeeper to your own life, it's time to ask whether their guidance is rooted in love or in a need to keep you small. Sometimes what they can't say to your face spills out behind your back. You might notice a shift in how others treat you, friends who grow distant, family members who suddenly seem cooler toward you, and you can't quite figure out why. And then it hits you. Someone's been talking. Maybe your sibling is sharing half-truths, exaggerating stories, or planting little seeds of doubt about your character, your choices, or your mental state. This kind of gossip is insidious. It's not just about hurt feelings, it's about rewriting your narrative in the eyes of others. And the worst part? It often comes cloaked in false concern. "I'm just worried about them," they might say to others. Or, "You know how forgetful she's getting." These whispers can slowly chip away at your reputation without you even knowing. Until one day someone treats you differently, and you're left putting the puzzle together alone. The motivation behind this behavior can come from deep, unresolved resentment. Maybe your sibling has always felt overshadowed. Maybe they were the one who struggled more, who never quite found their place. And instead of confronting their own pain, they redirect it, making you the villain in a story you didn't even know was being told. You've probably seen this play out in small, strange ways. They might bring up stories from childhood where you supposedly got all the attention, or they hold on to ancient grudges about things you thought were long forgotten. When they talk about the past, their version always paints you as the lucky one, the favorite, the golden child, even if your memory tells a very different story. That distorted view of history often fuels today's bitterness. And when someone can't let go of old wounds, they find new ways to relive them. They can't celebrate your success because to them, it's just another reminder of what they didn't get. They can't appreciate your growth because they're still stuck in a time when everything felt unfair. And as painful as that is to accept, it's not your job to heal the version of you they carry in their head. You can be kind. You can be open. But you don't have to shrink yourself to make someone else feel comfortable in their insecurity. Sometimes the final clue comes not in words, but in silence. A look, a pause, a smile that doesn't reach their eyes. It might happen when you're sharing something joyful, and suddenly their body stiffens or they glance away. You feel it, even if they say nothing. The warmth isn't there. The energy shifts. You might notice that when they hug you, it feels performative. When they compliment you, it sounds rehearsed. When they ask how you are, they're already looking at their phone. These small moments may seem meaningless to others, but to you, they tell the truth. Because your intuition, especially at this stage in life, is rarely wrong. You've lived too much, loved too much, lost too much to ignore your instincts now. If someone makes you feel small, nervous, or unloved, consistently, it's worth asking why. And if that someone is your sibling, the answer may be harder to accept. But clarity is always kinder than confusion. You're not here to fix anyone else's bitterness. You're not here to carry old family wounds alone. You're here to protect your peace, to nurture relationships that pour back into you, and to recognize when a smile hides a shadow. You know, at a certain point in life, you stop needing big confrontations or dramatic proofs to trust what your gut has been whispering all along. You've seen enough. You've felt enough. And if you're watching this and nodding quietly to yourself, thinking, "That's exactly how it is with my brother," or "That's the way my sister always makes me feel," you're not imagining it. That quiet tension, that subtle discomfort you feel around them. It's real, and it's trying to tell you something. Sometimes it's not even about how they speak to you. It's how they act when you're not in the room. You start to pick up on little shifts. People you were once close with seem distant now. Family events feel colder, like something about the air has changed. You hear things secondhand that make your stomach twist. Comments that were supposedly offhand or harmless, but somehow all trace back to your siblings' lips. And if you're honest with yourself, part of you always suspected. Because your siblings' compliments never quite landed right. Their concern always came with a sting. Their silence felt louder than any shout. But here's the thing. Recognizing the truth doesn't mean you have to retaliate or create distance that feels unnatural. It just means you stop gaslighting yourself. You stop hoping they'll become someone they're not. And you start protecting your space, not with anger, but with wisdom. Because hidden resentment doesn't always look like hatred. Sometimes it looks like politeness with a sharp edge. Other times it looks like a cold shoulder wrapped in a warm tone. But one of the surest signs, the one that cuts the deepest, is when your joy becomes their discomfort. You might notice it during the simplest of moments. You mention that you've started going for walks every morning, feeling stronger than you have in years. And they respond with, "Well, don't push yourself. You're not as young as you used to be." Or you talk about your grandkids visiting, and instead of smiling with you, they change the subject, complain about their own family, or remind you of all the things that aren't going well. This isn't about them being negative. It's about them being unable to stand in the light with you. When someone resents you, your happiness shines a light on their unhappiness. And instead of growing through it, they try to dim you down because it's easier than dealing with their own lack. And yes, sometimes they do it with a joke, or a sigh, or that one look you've known since childhood, the one that says, "Must be nice to be you." But here's what you need to remember. Your peace, your joy, your success at any age. They are not mistakes. They are not things to be hidden or downplayed. You've earned every bit of light in your life. You've fought for it. You've survived for it. And no one, not even someone who shares your blood, has the right to make you feel guilty for it. You might be asking, so what do I do with all of this? Cut them off? Confront them? The truth is, there's no one-size-fits-all answer. Some people find healing in honest conversations. Others choose distance, not out of anger, but self-respect. And many find a middle ground, choosing to redefine the relationship quietly, with boundaries that weren't there before. You don't owe anyone continued access to your heart just because you shared a last name. You owe yourself honesty. You owe yourself peace. Maybe that looks like shorter phone calls, or choosing not to engage in certain conversations. Maybe it means no longer trying to win their approval, or waiting for a version of them that never shows up. Maybe it means forgiving them, not because they asked, but because carrying that pain any longer just isn't worth it. Because here's something beautiful that happens as we age. We get to choose who we spend our energy on. We learn that not all family is chosen, and not all chosen people are family. We build our own circles. We invest in people who make us feel seen, supported, and celebrated. And if your sibling isn't one of those people right now, that's okay. It doesn't make you bitter. It makes you brave. There's no shame in outgrowing a dynamic that never really grew with you. There's no guilt in choosing your peace over their passive aggression. And there's deep wisdom in accepting the truth, not with judgment, but with clarity. You are not the keeper of anyone else's wounds. You are not the therapist for their resentment. You are not responsible for the healing they refuse to do. You are responsible for you. And if that means setting boundaries, honoring your gut, or finally calling things what they are, then that's a gift to yourself, not a punishment to them. You've made it this far in life, not by pleasing everyone, but by learning to listen, to your body, your spirit, your instincts. So if something feels off, trust it. You don't need a confession or an apology to know what you've experienced. And you certainly don't need to carry the weight of unspoken hostility just to keep the peace. There is a better peace, a real peace, that comes when you stop denying your own truth. So breathe deeply, straighten your shoulders, and remember, your joy doesn't need permission. Your peace doesn't need validation. And your value doesn't shrink just because someone else refuses to see it. You deserve to be surrounded by people who lift you, not drag you down. Who light up when you walk into the room. Who don't compete, compare, or keep score, but instead walk beside you with love, laughter, and grace. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. You're not alone. So many others have walked this road, and your story might help someone else find clarity too. And if this video gave you something to think about, I'd be honored if you clicked like and subscribe to the Strong Elderly Life channel. We've got so many more conversations ahead about relationships, wellness, aging with purpose, and living fully at every stage. Here's to your peace, your truth, and your freedom. No matter what your family looks like, you have the right to a life filled with love that lifts you. Stay strong, stay wise, and stay exactly as you are, beautifully, unapologetically you.